Hello and welcome to Human Innovation Questions Answered, which is in short HIQA. HIQA live streaming into YouTube, Facebook, and into LinkedIn, of course. And welcome everyone. A couple of people are already showing up, so I keep a little bit of talking before we go into things. Today's topic is how to build innovation culture. So I gathered a lot of questions over the last week on innovation cultures, which I wanted to bring up into um, this episode today. So it's all about innovation culture, what we are talking today. If you have questions, please feel free in the live environment, put them into the chat wherever you are. I think I can see questions from LinkedIn, Facebook, and from YouTube, of course. So if you have questions, put them into the chat today. And if you see this in the recording and you have further questions to the topics I'm explaining today, I'm answering today, you can contact me on contact@heitlandinnovation.com. That's how I get most of the questions, but you're welcome wherever you see this video or the audio version listening inside the podcast. You're welcome to contact me. Ask questions to these topics, or ask questions I can cover in one of the future HIQA episodes. HIQA, Human Innovation Questions Answered Live. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Jens Heitland, originally from Germany, but now living in Spain. I'm the CEO of Heitland Innovation, which is a human innovation company based in Germany. I'm doing a lot of other things, having a couple of other business, but that's the main thing about this show. So it's all about human innovation, and we're training companies in human innovation. So we have built out the training plan, which is helping companies to implement human innovation from A to Z. So if you're interested in that, contact me as well on contact@heitlandinnovation.com. But let's get into today's show. So innovation culture is what everything is about. And the first question I will cover is, what is innovation culture? And that's, of course, as often with the questions, they're very broad. And I got the questions to go deeper into a couple of, so I will do this in the next coming HIQAs, where we do dive deeper into one specific topic and really go into the nitty-gritty details. Innovation culture. What is innovation culture? Culture for me is basically something that's visible when the manager or the management team is not connected or not in the room. I always said that when I was a long time working in the corporate world, it's like basically when I'm not there as the leader and what the team is doing, that's culture. That's the culture. These are the things that are happening when the manager is not in the room. And when we talk about innovation culture, it's basically what is happening when we're not thinking about innovation, when we're just being as we are, when we are just working in the corporate or working in a startup, working and innovating without thinking about innovation. So that's basically for me innovation culture from a definition perspective. Of course, there are most probably more scientific versions of that, but I try to keep it practical because I'm a practical person and I love to keep it practical. So maybe giving you a little bit of examples how I have been working with innovation culture in the past. So I was living in Russia, in Moscow, in 2014 to 2017. And as part of my job there was I was the head of innovation and customer experience. And we did the first retail corporate accelerator in Russia at that time. So how does that link to innovation culture? So we used that, of course, to solve problems, which you always do with innovation, but we used the same thing, which was the corporate accelerator, working with startups and bringing startups into the corporate environment in a way that we wanted to foster the innovation culture. And just giving you a couple of examples. So there have been innovation teams, and the innovation teams, of course, come from a background where everything is very, very fast. They're thinking very fast, they're quick validating and quickly failing. If you compare this to the corporate world where I come from, we're trained to think risk. So we are risk averse. We understand everything we do has a risk profile. And we need to try to solve things in a way that we're not taking a risk, specifically in a brand where I was working, which is world famous. Then, of course, because of the hierarchy and the complexity of organizations, it's fairly slow when it comes to decision making. And then connected to that as well, very hierarchy oriented. So going back into that setting, a corporate accelerator, we brought startups together with internal team members, which means from the corporate experts, as we called them at that time. So they have been working together on solving the problems for the company. And interesting from a culture aspect, I will not go to details. If anyone is interested in our corporate accelerator, happy to do an episode on that as well, or you contact me. So results have been that over time, the understanding between the startup members and the corporate teams, they got to know and understand how the different side works. So slowly adapting, if we take the corporate colleagues from me at that time, they slowly adapted to the way of thinking of the startups. Hey, this can be quick. Hey, we can find a solution for this. It was really on, hey, there are possibilities we haven't seen in the past. So they started discussing things outside of the corporate accelerator environment, inside of the corporate, in management teams, in different discussion rounds, in different projects on, hey, how can we do things differently? How can we do things in a better way, in a faster way? How can we implement that? And fast forward to when I left the corporate, which was in 2019, what interesting was this small effects. So this corporate accelerator in 2015-16 has had a huge impact on the people who have been connected, as well the people who have been engaged with the corporate accelerator, because they took these learnings into their day-to-day business. And that's exactly what innovation culture for me is, and how innovation culture can be established over a long-term period, because the effect, I mean, it's hard to measure it in details, but it's there, and I've seen it live over a period of 5 to 6 years. It's very interesting if you do that. So that's the first one. Next question I got is how to build an innovation culture. So going now further into details. For me, as I always say, so those of you who have been with us a couple of times already, is all about leadership. Innovation culture is started always from the leadership. And if we now look into how do you start an innovation culture from scratch, for me it's about clarity of the leadership of the company, of the leadership of the business area, of the leadership of the location. Whatever the business is, can be a startup in the same way. Why do you want to innovate? Being clear on that, having a clear goal on saying, this is what we want to do, this is why we want to do it, and there's no way back. As in every good change project or change environment, if you work with changing a company culture, you need to be very clear from the beginning, saying why you do this and that you're going to do that, and it is decided. So everyone inside the corporate, inside the startup, understands, okay, we're going to do this, there's no way back. Then being very transparent that it is a journey. If you think about culture changes in the, let's say, not working environment, cultural changes take years and centuries. So of course you can steer that a little bit better inside of the corporate environment, but it is a journey, and everyone needs to understand that changing the culture is a journey and it's not going to happen today or tomorrow. And being open as well with the transparency of that, because it is a journey, we will do mistakes, we will learn on the way. And that's exactly why we want to do that. We want to learn and we want to bring this forward. So be clear of who is doing what inside of the innovation culture, what you're expecting from the people, why it is important. And when you go deeper, let's say you have innovation teams, you have people who are proposing ideas, you need to be very clear on why do you go for a specific idea and why do you not go for a specific idea. So that's what I mean with transparency. Then understand, and that's specifically important for the top management, for the leadership, it is a long-term journey. It's at least a year where you need to get towards innovation culture. It's not a 1 or 2 week project. And I know this patience is often not given in organizations. That's why it's failing all over. I've seen it very, very, very often that initially the idea is there, and yes, we want to build innovation or entrepreneurship culture, which we go later into what is the difference. And it's not really understood that it is a long-term game, that there is a commitment needed, which is longer than a year and not just a couple of weeks or months. So very important, taking the time. Then start with the empowerment. So going from clarity, transparency, long-term focus into empowerment. How do you empower and delegate the responsibility to the employees, to the teams inside of your organization? Give them the resources needed to fulfill, that's the German English today, give them the resources needed to fulfill their responsibilities. Big empowerment, empower the organization, empower the different teams of your organization to innovate. And then trust. Trust that it's going to be well. Be a leader and build a leadership team that's the good example. You need to be 100% a good example. If you're not in a leadership team visible as a good example, it's not going to work, because in a lot of hierarchy settings, and specifically in a lot of countries where hierarchy is still important, people are looking to you. People are looking at the leadership. If the leadership is not in tune with what they are saying, it's not going to work and it will fail. And then, of course, celebrate failures, but also celebrate successes. And that's just a starting opportunity for you to build an innovation culture. Hope that helps to answer the question. Next question I got is, why does a company benefit from an innovation culture? For me, that's obvious, but because I got this question, I thought, okay, let's go into this, and I touched a little bit of that already in one of the previous HIQAs. Um, Resistance against external influences, innovation culture, and the agility of an innovation culture, the way you work with an organism inside of your organization helps you to be resistant against external influences. If we take COVID, which was the example in one of the shows I have used, if you have an innovation culture, you are well suited to work with the impact that it's created, because your organism is already able to work in a way that they're empowered to take decisions and can react way faster. And then another point which I want to stress out is employees. Employees, so your team members will stay longer and love to work for the business. And a business that has an innovation culture built into their ecosystem is a business that is attractive for a lot of people. The same for the leaders. Leaders will be way more happy, because it's not about being the big hierarchy person in an organization. It's more about, how can I empower? How can I learn to empower? And how can I be a true leader, not a manager only? And that's also healthy for leadership, because they're in tune with who they are. And then, of course, always everyone is interested, innovation culture has a huge impact on the business. So the impact of the business and the impact of the growth of the business, the steadiness and sustainable long-term perspective of that business is better than if you don't have innovation culture. That's for me the basic factors on why does a company benefit from an innovation culture. Happy if anyone has a different opinion. So we got a question here. What do we get? Okay. Yeah, slightly little out of context, but let's bring that in here as well. How to build an innovation lab. I've talked about innovation lab in the past, but let's go into this. How to build an innovation lab. I think if we take my definition of an innovation lab, for me, it's a team that enables an organization to innovate in the long term. I know that there are innovation labs which are kind of buildings or places where people are working on innovation, but for me, the essential part is a team that empowers the organization to innovate. And if we take this definition of how do you build an innovation lab, it's key for me that this team need to be built up, that they're not gatekeepers. They're more facilitators of innovation in an organization than the experts who are doing innovation only. And of course, it depends on what your goal is. So if you want to disrupt your business model, if you want to figure out how do you take your business to the next level from a business model perspective, it's a different setup and a different way of working than if you want to improve and foster the innovation inside your core of your business. But let's take maybe today the example of core business innovation and the innovation lab, how you build that into the core business. For me, it's about starting small. starting small, building a team that's coming from the inside of the organization. I have done a couple of mistakes, but I as well had the possibility to do a couple of things right. When I was building the first innovation team inside of IKEA, which was for the IKEA Centers business inside of the Russian organization, when this was my first innovation job, it was about taking people from inside of the business who understand the culture of the business, who understand the challenges of the business, but as well who are ambitious to grow and to have different opinions. So different opinions between each other. So for me, it was important to build a team that argues with each other, but understands the necessity of the business, of what is required if we do this thing, what is required if we innovate in that way. So very important for me, start small, and then starting with education. It is important that you take a team on that journey where you go. I think two parts in the most important sense is the leadership. How does this team, if you call it innovation team, empower the organization to innovate? How do they secure that there is an empowerment mechanism inside of the organism of the organization? And that's the number one reason why you should build an innovation lab. And then, of course, you can go into education of the innovation management. And innovation management for me is building up a systematic way of how an organization works with innovation. And there are things like, from an example, it's a portfolio. How do you work with a portfolio of projects inside of the organization that are tailor made towards innovation? So if you say, okay, we want to innovate our core, what are the different things you focus on? How do you build that system that allows you to bring a portfolio of problems you want to solve into ideas, into projects, and then taking that into the organization? That means system, portfolio, projects, how you deal with all of that. And then, of course, you go deeper into how do you prototype, how do you validate ideas, how do you go more into this, and how do you measure that for the business. So it's more about educating this team into all of this topics so that they can help the organization, again, going into the empowerment part, to make it happen. And key for me, if we take this one, is apply what you learn straight away. I think it's not about taking a team, implementing a team and educating them for a year and then they're starting. They need to do it from day one. So you start, you learn, you fail, you do it. So if you then take the team, that can engage with the vertical of your business, or it can engage with a specific location of your business if you have more locations, and really taking that into that test environment. So this team is directly starting with the empowerment of one larger team, one part of your business, and involves all levels of the hierarchy straight away. Because then they basically start with the empowerment understanding from day one, instead being the gatekeeper. So how do we empower? How do we train? How do we use the knowledge we gained to bring that into the business and impact the business? I think it's very, very important that the focus is on business impact, because that's what the language of most organizations is. And if you do that, it's going to be successful. Um, and I think it's important that you are going back to the transparency, be transparent, what's going on, show what you're doing, show what you're doing wrong, show what you're doing right, show the successes, but also the failures and what you learned with the failures. And a big topic, which I should have done years back, and I can highly um, recommend everyone to do this, specifically in the corporate, document your journey, document what you're doing, how you're doing, and share what you're doing. Just, I mean, maybe not a YouTube channel, but it would be awesome, because it is an opportunity for everyone to see from the corporate what you're doing. So that's basically how I would build an innovation lab with my definition of innovation. I hope that helped. If there are more questions, then please let me know. Next question. What is the difference between innovation and entrepreneurship? That's that's a good question. So for me, the biggest difference is innovation has a focus on learning and adoption of the business. So how can I validate assumptions quickly inside of the business? And then of course it depends on what the focus of the innovation team is, or innovation as such. Is it about disrupting the business, or is it about improving the business? And maybe it's both as well. So but the for me the critical part is learning and adoption, validating basically what how do you solve problems. When we go into entrepreneurship, for me the focus of entrepreneurship is of course partly solving problems, but it's all about how do you do that in generating revenue and profit. So the focus is more on the financial impact of what you're doing, not on how do you validate the problems. So the focus on innovation is more validating the problems, building new ideas, building new products, building new business models. And of course, there's an effect onto the revenue and profit, but it's a different focus, at least for me. So how can I earn money is the entrepreneurship angle. And of course, for me, obvious, both of these two things should be put it together. So you should build innovation inside of your business, that allows you to build further revenue streams for your business, or helps you to build a new business model that is enabling you to be profitable in the future and building your business further. Hope that helps. How to build an innovation strategy? That's a difficult one, because there are a lot of strategy consultants who will disagree with me. For me, if we just focus on basics, because I mean, building an innovation strategy could be another HIQA in its own. So what is innovation? The understanding, like I said, is it core business innovation? Is it more transformative innovation? What is innovation for your business? And really understanding that and being true to where you want to be with that. As part of that, it's not just defining of what is innovation, it's going as well into why do we want to innovate. Why do we want to innovate with this business? Why do you need an innovation strategy? Do you truly need an innovation strategy just because there's a consultancy saying that you need an innovation strategy, or because of the business says, hey? So for me, it's understanding this before you even think about building an innovation strategy. And then for me, innovation strategy is two key points. It's the culture and management, which fits into the next question. So how do you focus on culture with the innovation strategy, which is a long-term focus on building innovation ecosystems that help you to innovate on the long term and successful. And then the innovation management is more about how do you implement that operationally inside of the business, going from what problems do you want to solve, how are you going to solve them, and doing that in a way that you have the right processes in place. So these two things: innovation culture focused more on people, and innovation management focused more. And I think for if we stay in the strategy, building a strategy that's fluid and flexible. For me, there's nothing worth with innovation strategies where it's either they're extremely high, which is more a visionary perspective, or they're extremely low, where going into this is the problem we are solving, this is exactly how we do this. So you need to find a balance of what this is. As you can guess, I'm not a big fan of building a lot of strategy paper, which helps you to get an approval from the board. For me, it's more the activation of the ideas and the activation of the culture that's the most important thing when it comes to strategies. For me, it can be a one pager. This is where we want to be in the future, and these are the possibilities how we can get there. And there are two things: people and processes, and the management part of that. And then you go into that. That's at least my short version of that answer. Innovation versus management. What is innovation? Innovation culture, I mean, and what is innovation management? Innovation culture, as said, is key focus on people. Innovation culture is the biggest opportunity for every business out there. I can't highlight this enough, because there are a lot of people who focus on innovation management and failing over time because the internal immune system, as it is often called in the innovation experts, the internal immune system is fighting against innovation inside the business, because human Humans are used to do what they have been doing well over time. Looking back, they always try to keep what they have been doing because that's the easier way. And that's just how we are as humans. So you need to focus on people, the leadership, the empowerment, and the long term perspective of how the actions with the people inside an organization help you to be long term successful. So, innovation culture is that. If we go into innovation management, it's how do you focus on the problems? So, what are the different problems? How do you basically take problems, validate what are the most risky problems for your business, then you go into finding the right ideas, and then you go into how do you plug this into a total system of your business. So for me, it's you need to start with the system before you even think about implementing and solving these problems. What is the system that allows you to build innovation into your organization? And then you go into, okay, if we have these problems, how do we take these ideas, build a portfolio strategy? And that's then more about how do you manage a portfolio? You go into how do you manage single projects inside of that portfolio? How do you do prototyping? How you build a GPS, which is the measuring of innovation inside of the totality, and then you go implementing that. So management is all about the operational part of innovation. Culture is all about the people part. And as you can guess, both is needed to innovate successful on the long run. So that's the last question I have. If anyone has a question, please let me know. Happy to answer them right now, or of course later in the chats. Let's finish for today. So if you have questions you want me to answer in the one of the next HIQAs, please contact me on contact@heitlandinnovation.com. Contact@heitlandinnovation.com. Send me an email, send me your questions. If you want to argue, if you disagree with topics I'm saying, happy to talk to you as well, because it's all about conversations in the world where we're living and understanding different perspectives. That's HIQA today. Thank you very much for joining live or listening to the audio version or watching this on YouTube or wherever you see this afterwards. Thank you very much. Was a pleasure, and see you again next week, 11 o'clock German time, which is Central European Summer Time, every Thursday in the moment. Thank you very much, and see you next week.